The industry today is a shadow of what it used to be. It used to be important. It was one of the larger employers in this area. With, if you have 30 or 40 boats, different times would fish out of Port Burrell, they'd have a full crew of 5 men on the boat. So there's 200 men going to work every day and earning a living here. And then when the season wound down for the summer months, in those days they didn't catch much in the summer, they'd go back home to Port Dover, Port Maitland, or sometimes Port Stanley.
I guess it was 1931. My great-grandfather and my grandfather, William and Cecil, decided they wanted to be commercial fishermen. So they bought a boat and they started fishing in around 31, and then for all those years. And then they built a bigger boat, I think in 1942, I think it was. The south side that built at Erie Gamble's in Port Dover. And they fished, then my grandfather fished for many years until he had a stroke. And my father was going to college to be a photographer, actually. And he ended up deciding to quit school and come back and took over running the family business.
My father was born in Port Stanley, married a girl from, grew up in Port Dover, and married a girl from Port Burrell. I'm actually from Port Dover. Well, no, actually, I was born in Tillsonburg, started out, spent 2 or 3 years in Port Burrell that I don't remember. Moved to Dover and then come back. I married my wife here, and she come from Port Burrell. I guess you wanted to start with how the fishing industry was when I started into it, and it was definitely in decline. It was probably the 10 to 15 worst years I think the industry saw since probably maybe even the Depression, although I don't think the Depression was as bad as what it was, because you had decline of the valuable species. The whitefish, the herring had been gone for a while, but the whitefish were still available, and the blue pickerel, and they basically disappeared. And so the fishermen had to turn to trying to make a fishery out of the yellow perch, and there was no yellow pickerel at the time. They had pretty well disappeared too. And nobody wanted the yellow perch. I fished for them for, one time we got paid 95 cents for 100 pounds of yellow perch. You basically had to quit because you couldn't pay expenses. Most of the skilled fishermen had to leave the industry because they couldn't support families. And they were was pretty near a disaster until it got so bad that the federal government stepped in with a price support system in the 1960s with a 10-cent floor price on our fish, which was basically, as I say, just yellow perch. And the buyers found out that they could sell them at that price or higher, and things gradually picked up from there.
We're currently now on our 4th boat, but when my grandfather started on the Cecil M back in the day, it was made out of wood. And then when they decided to build the second boat, the steel boat, the south side, in the 1940s at Erie Gamble Shipyard in Port Dover, and then they run that one for quite a few years until, like I said, my father took over, and he ran it until he capsized in 1975. That was she was a 65-footer, and then he took on the Endeavor in the winter, him and his best buddy Scoop, Warren. They built the 45-foot boat, and we renamed it the Southside 2. And he fished it from 1976 until 2006 until we end up buying a bigger boat, which is now the one we use when he retired. And I renamed it. I bought it from a fellow in Wheatley. It was named the Raymar Bev, and I changed the name to the Amanda May, which is after my daughter and my grandmother. And my son, he's currently took on another project. He's bought a boat called the Cindy Lou that he runs fishing charters off of, and basically harbor maintenance with that vessel. It was a fish tug out of Erie. Yeah, fishing on Lake Erie is it's very unique. Every day is different because you never know what you're gonna get. Everybody hopes to have full nets every day, but every day is just like bits and bites. Every day is a different handful, but it's the best way of life there is, as far as I'm concerned. Being a fisherman on Lake Erie, it's a small but mighty lake, is for sure, and it's very plentiful with lots of different kinds of fish, not just only perch and pickerel that we catch mainly, but there's various amount of species in the Lake Erie that get utilized, like white perch, white bass, and even down to sheephead that they take for mink farmers. But it's a good way of life on Lake Erie. Some more of the dangers of being on the lake too is my father and I were on the Auxiliary Coast Guard for 22 years, and you always had all kinds of calls, but most of the time was out of gas or stuff like that. But this one particular day, it was blowing pretty hard out of the southwest, and we took off. There was a sailboat in danger. I think he was just 10 miles southwest of Burwell. When we left that to go rescue him, we got out to the end of the rock pile, and a huge wave came and smashed into the bow and smashed all 3 windows out of the bow, and filled her full of water and cut my dad. I think he got 6 or 7 stitches across his cheek, and so we couldn't go do the rescue that day. We ended up having to turn around because we didn't have any windows left in the boat, and the harbor being so shallow, a couple other times, another feller fisherman was in town, and when we were leaving the channel, he got caught on bottom, and he was laying right on his side. So we were still there, and we turned around and went back and helped rescue him off and got him going out of the channel there that we had back in the day. But there's a lot of hazards when there's big waves, and it's just, you have to be careful.
It was a combination of storms, like wind. It'd be like, I'm sure, downshear. The water would turn perfectly flat, and then there'd be waves, which I estimated up to 30 or 35 feet, 10 to 15 miles off the shore, where we run into those. And we got in. Ordinarily, it was a 2.5-hour trip. By the time we got a mile off of Port Burrell, we'd been, I think, 4 hours. And it was so windy at times. We were rigged, we could trawl, and we had a door that would lift, a weight of steel door on the roof that we could lift to bring the cot end of a trawl full of fish aboard the boat. That thing was flapping like a screen door, up and down with the wind. We had to take all the box hooks we had on the boat, which we used to move things around, hook them onto the door and tie it down to keep it from flapping. And the boat, it was blowing so hard that the boat didn't even rock. It was turned like into a big sail, and we just stayed steady all the time. And the boys were able to keep working, and we got the fish all out. And we got about a mile off the harbor, and we shut right down, slowed down. And I went back and told them to get their gear off, because the harbor in Burwell is notorious for some pretty dangerous waves at the end of the breakwall. But the seas were not as bad there because it was a west-southwest wind. It wasn't going onshore. It was going the length of the lake. And we proceeded at a reduced speed. We were kind of looking the harbor over, deciding what to do. and we got hit by a weird wave, I guess. I saw it come, and there was a good-sized wave, probably a 12, 14-footer or so. But halfway down it was the white water from another wave that had overtaken. And when it hit the boat, it jarred it so hard that everything on the boat slid to the starboard side. And with the wind, what it was, and the way the boat went on its side somewhat. Well, I tried to get the nose of the boat or the bow up into the water, up into the waves, but the propeller was far enough out that I had no control. So the boat proceeded to fill with water, so we waited till we stood on the side of the wheelhouse with the puller door open, and then we heard a big wave coming, and it overturned the boat, and we went out the door, and there were three of us surfaced, and the fourth one we didn't see again. We don't know what become of him. So we grabbed some of the stuff that floated up from the boat, a rope, an anchor line with the stuff we use now, floats. So we grabbed that, a picking stool, and the boys had put on life jackets when we'd slowed down and taken their oilskins off, and we had a life ring. So we thought, well, we're not going to survive this, but the only thing that really worried us was that nobody would know what happened because we'd lost all radio communications. Well, we were able to see when the boat turned over that the aerials had all been snapped off from the strength of the wind. So we went along. We had a pretty rough ride. Every waves would come and drive you under the water and drag you behind, and they're tow you along behind them. Then you'd come up, and then sometimes another one would be coming. You'd hear it. Under you'd go again. And we were in the water for, I'm not sure now, probably a couple of hours or so. And this is the 10th of November, so it wasn't very warm. I had pretty near lost consciousness. The other fellows were younger. The one fellow was not too good, and the other fellow was youngest and a little heavier set. And the water wasn't affecting him, the cold, as much. And all of a sudden I could feel land under me or something solid under my feet. It kind of come to, and we were on a beach, which is pretty remarkable because most of that is clay bank along there, and with a high wind, if you come in against the clay bank, you get pounded pretty bad, so not much chance of surviving it there. But we did hit a beach, and we had this rope, and we pulled it on in, and lo and behold, there was the fourth member tangled in the rope that had come off the boat. And so we were able to recover his body. And the youngest fellow that was in the best shape, he walked up the bank, and there was a house there, and the people were just leaving to go shopping. And the amazing thing was, when you're pulled behind these waves, they pull your life jacket right off. You'd come up, and it was skipping along in the wind. And also pull your pants off, although I did keep mine. And the fellow that went up the hill, he was just in his boxer shorts. I think the people were kind of surprised to see him. And he got them to call because they were people. It turned out even an OPP officer had saw the boat capsize. This John Warren had tried to come out to rescue us in his small fish boat, and the wind was so strong that the boat was continually blown right over against the East Pier in Port Burrell, and they couldn't even get the boat out of the harbor because of the strong winds. He was a pretty good friend and quite an ardent fisherman, very good fellow. He was so upset they had to sedate him. Anyways, once the one fellow went up, the second fellow, he wasn't too bad a shape. He started up, and I thought, well, if he can, I'll walk up the bank. So I staggered up. Time I got there, the OPP were cruiser was just going by because when you come up the bank, you were closer to the road. The house was a little bit farther east. And so we told him that the other fellow's body was on the beach. One of the OPP officers went down and pulled it up because it had actually started to wash out into the lake again. And the ambulance showed up. They loaded me in and the other two fellas in. The doctor come along. He said, well, might as well take him home and do as much good for him there as he will in the hospital. So we ended up all going back to our homes, and that was the end of the fishing season for 1975.
So some of the challenges, I guess, of being a commercial fisherman is, I guess, not everybody wakes up in the morning and decides that, hey, I want to be a commercial fisherman today. You're basically, if you're not born into this business, and it's in your blood when you're born, because you want to be a commercial fisherman when you're a little boy growing up, but there's a lot of challenges nowadays. It's hard physical labor, and nobody wants to do hard physical labor anymore. And there's lots of rules and regulations with the Ministry of Natural Resources, with our quotas and our license conditions, and then there's Transport Canada with your 4-year inspections on your vessels that we have to deal with, and all the cost of everything, the price of fuel, and it's hard to get people that want to be fishermen nowadays. So like I said, when I retire, my son takes over. He's going to have trouble finding people that want to work for him, and that's some of the challenges to be a commercial fisherman today in this world. One of the questions that some of the customers and people ask me is, how does it feel to be the last commercial fisherman in Port Burrell? I said, well, hopefully I'm not the last commercial fisherman in Port Burrell. My son's going to take over, but it's a pretty surreal feeling that knowing that this Port Burrell went from one of the busiest commercial fishing ports on the North Shore Lake Erie to the smallest. So being the smallest port on Lake Erie now, is a lot of it's to do with politics back in the day, and with the harbor silting in on us, and so I'm just kind of stubborn. So look, I just stick it out because originally I'm a Port Burrell. I'm purebred, as far as I always say, and but there's a lot of challenges of it's kind of a lonely feeling, thinking that, wow, I am the last person, until hopefully my son one day is going to carry on, and then he'll be the last commercial fisherman. But I guess the Martin family is probably going to be the last family ever to fish in Port Burrell, because nobody's going to move to Port Burrell to start being a commercial fisherman in the area. There's still a few fellows that come and fish here, but they're not locals. They just come because they have to, because they're in our rules. And it's almost like a lonely feeling knowing that there's, in one way, I guess it's a good feeling too, because I'm keeping the tradition alive, and it'll be going on as long as there's Martins in Port Burrell. I'm positive of it.